The lush green Pocono Mountains of eastern Pennsylvania have been long known as a vacationer's and honeymooners' paradise. Throughout the season, visitors come to enjoy the best of nature. But twice a year, thousands more flock just to watch the best of NASCAR. 1 week ago, it was these guys who were the key players. Juan Pablo Montoya wanted to make history. Mark Martin wanted to maintain his remarkable momentum. But it was Jimmie Johnson who continued to be the juggernaut at Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
It's race day at the most famous race course in the world, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
It is Juan Pablo Montoya who is the leader. These guys are trying to run down Juan Pablo Montoya. Whoa, in the 18 car.
Guys, it looks like we blew it right front.
That's a 4-second gap you're looking at.
There's nobody close, man. Focus on the track.
He has been just unbelievably dominant. He's on his way to victory lane.
42 car was too fast on pit road in 2 different segments.
We had this in the bag, and they screw us. I swear on my children and my wife, I was not speeding.
A lot of frustration inside the cockpit of that 42.
Jimmie Johnson has taken the lead from Mark Martin.
Here he goes. Look at Mark trying to make a move on Jimmy.
One more, bud. Go get him.
Jimmie Johnson becomes a 3-time winner at the Brickyard 400.
Oh, yes, boys. You are absolutely incredible. Just incredible.
This weekend, the stars of NASCAR covered the tricky triangle we call Pocono Raceway. It's a triangle because there's only 3 turns. It's tricky because all 3 of those turns are different. Well, with qualifying rained out on Friday, these final practice sessions you're about to see are extremely critical. For more, let's go down to the garage area and Vince Welch.
Well, Doc, if Brickyard runner-up Mark Martin is to be one of the favorites again here at Pocono this weekend, he's going to have a better race car than he had when they ran here back in June when he finished 19th. Crew Chief Alan Gustafson says they're going to take these 2 practices, do a little setup searching in the first practice, and then hope to fine-tune in the second practice. And as good a season as it's been for Mark Martin, keep in mind he's 9th in points, just 43 away from being out of the top 12. So a strong finish this weekend would be a big help in solidifying his position in the chase. Dave?
Vince, we had a lot of rain around here this week, a lot of flooding, and when things get washed away, you shore them up. And that's kind of been the story of Matt Kent's this season. Started out with 2 wins, was leading the championship. Now he's down to 12th, and he's right on the bubble. What will work for Matt? Well, good race weekends, like 2 out of the last 3, where he's finished in the top 10. And remember, he and all the other drivers fighting for a spot in the chase only have 6 races left to do it, starting today. Doc?
Thanks, guys. The clock is ticking for these drivers. They know that chase is so important to be able to possibly get a shot to be on that stage. Jeff Gordon has won it 4 times. Jimmie Johnson has won 3 championships in a row. It has now moved into 2nd place overall in the point standings. They are all chasing Tony Stewart, who won here back in June. Tony is the largest points lead of the year, 192 over Jimmie Johnson. You see Montoya still in 10th spot. Boy, that win last week would have been very important. And missing among those top 13, Kyle Busch, who finished 38th at Indianapolis, now at 14th overall in the standings. Hello, everyone. Glad to have you with us, along with Dale Jarrett and Andy Petrie. I'm Jerry Punch at Pocono Raceway. And so many teams that have been coming here over the years, so they've always been in a fog when they come here. And it has nothing to do with the weather, guys. It has to do with this very, very difficult racetrack.
Yeah, it's such a unique layout. You go down into turn 1. You have a turn that was designed after Trenton, New Jersey, 14 degrees of banking. And I think this has become the most important corner on this racetrack. It's a little bit bumpy at times, but you can really carry a lot of speed there. And carrying speed off of there to the backstretch is really important.
And you carry a lot of speed into the 90-degree tunnel turn, and it's kind of designed after Indianapolis Motor Speedway and their 90-degree turns, and you come through that turn with a lot of speed, and you have to use a lot of racetrack, and it carries you then to the flat turn 3.
Yeah, turn 3 doesn't have much banking. Matter of fact, it looks off camber sometimes like it's banked the other way. There's only 6 degrees. It was designed after Milwaukee where you carry a lot of momentum. This corner has also changed quite a bit. They put a strip of pavement about 2 lanes up from the bottom. Used to be you wanted to be right on the bottom. But this strip of pavement now is where a lot of the guys run. They say that's getting worn, so you can make passes on the bottom and up to the top. So it makes it a lot of fun. But you have to carry a lot of speed on the exit of this corner.
Because it launches you to this straightaway, and I think they must have designed this one after Edwards Air Force Base. But it is the longest straightaway in racing, and you really have to carry that speed down this straightaway.
3/4 of a mile long, that front straightaway. So 3 different turns, 3 different lengths of straightaways, and that's why they call this place the Tricky Triangle. And by the way, if you say you're having trouble in turn 4 at Pocono, you're lost because there's only 3 turns here, folks. So they're getting set for practice, and the 2 practice sections today. And we'll cover them both, this one and, of course, happy hour coming up later in our coverage. Our coverage of today, qualifying at at Iowa. Indianapolis was last week. Iowa for the NASCAR Nationwide Series out in Newton, Iowa, 1 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN2. And, of course, live flag-to-flag coverage of the NASCAR Nationwide cars presented by GoDaddy.com at 4 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN. Our live flag-to-flag coverage of the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series here at Pocono, presented by Old Spice, tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN, beginning with NASCAR Countdown. And, of course, we'll update the pre-race edition and what's all going on in motorsports on NASCAR Now at 10 a.m. Eastern, presented by 5 Hour Energy. And we'll wrap up the weekend tomorrow night at 10 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN2. Back in just a moment. Back at Pocono Raceway, and the cars are rolling onto the racetrack. Yesterday, we had rain throughout much of the afternoon. They did get on the racetrack for 53 minutes of practice. And in that session, the 5-car looked like he had everybody covered.
Well, he did. He beat Jimmy Johnson by a half a second in qualifying trim. They were kind of all in qualifying trim yesterday because they felt like we had good weather for this practice today. So they, even though it looked like we weren't going to get qualifying in, most of them did make qualifying runs.
Yeah, this is a 45-minute session that these guys are going to have right now. The one thing they're going to need to do is get some rubber back onto this racetrack because it was all washed away. And so this is going to be a pretty important session for them. They won't take as much right now because there is no rubber out there. They won't take as much from this, but as this session moves on and then into the next session, that's the most important as this racetrack heats up. We'll be here for both of them.
Here's the 14 car of Tony Stewart, and the 2-time winner this year. Both of Tony's wins have come after qualifying has been rained out here in June at Pocono and in July at Daytona.
We're going down the front straightaway with Tony Stewart. This is the fastest part of the racetrack. You can see those signs that kind of give you an idea as you get down high braking area. You want to get off of it, let your car roll. These guys you see not right on the bottom. It's really rough on the bottom of the racetrack. As you fast exit, you literally drive right to the wall as you go down this long back straightaway. This is normally as long as other racetracks that we run in.
Yeah, I still can't see the turn from this shot. And you see he's turning 9,000 RPMs, 195 miles an hour when he gets out of the throttle. Now he has got to get right down against this curbing type area on the bottom of the racetrack and then carry that speed all the way out to the wall.
Yeah, you really have to make sure you carry that exit speed because if you don't, somebody will get to the inside. Now here's what we were talking about, that strip of asphalt. You can see down to the bottom. But Tony's too high in the wall.
God.
We're back up, guys.
And Tony
spins right in front of Jeff Gordon.
And Kurt Busch goes by, and Tony has pancaked that car.
Yeah, that car is, that's a backup car for sure.
We talk about it being Groundhog Day. This happened in June on the final day. It happened in happy hour back in June when he had an issue with his race car. DJ, exactly what you were talking about up in turn 3.
That's a very difficult corner. It was always difficult, and we ran on the bottom while I was driving, and now these guys have moved up. And if you miss that just a little bit, get to the outside of it, there's no grip there, Andy.
How important was not having rubber on the racetrack when he went in there versus yesterday? I mean, they probably had a little different condition here.
Yeah, you had no rubber. You had jet dryers that had been out there drying this racetrack, so you have that residue from that. So just a very slick condition, and Tony just missed that corner. You don't have to miss it by much, and that's what happens.
The irony is this was the backup car back in June that they had to bring out when he wrecked the primary car in happy hour. And he started in this car at the back of the pack and drove it all the way to the front, leading 39 laps to win the race. First lap of practice here on Saturday, and here is Tony Stewart in turn 3.
You want to arc the car in pretty high right there to get down to that asphalt, but man, just wasn't a lot of grip there.
Yeah, he got on the asphalt, and it was just like there was no grip there whatsoever. And these guys had told me yesterday in the garage area that strip of pavement is losing a lot of the grip that it had the first couple of years.
When they put that asphalt down through that groove, it was black. You could see a big difference in color. Now you see the color is not nearly the difference. So you've lost a lot of grip there over the last couple of years now.
Now from Tony's onboard camera, watch what he saw.
We were riding with him when this happened real time, but
Wow. You can just see the back end of the car start out. There's really nothing you can do in that situation. You don't have much room, and as you get off of that one strip, there's even less grip than what you had.
DJ, you hear drivers use two words talking here a lot. They talk about this place being line sensitive, but looks like he was on the line there.
Yeah, he was. It was just probably just carrying a little too much speed, trying to get that fast lap up there to start with, hoping because it was cool that he could put a good number up there. But as you can see, just not enough grip in the back of the car for Tony to make that corner.
Good news is he's able to walk away, but that they will have to go. As you see, they're already unloading the backup car. Darian Grubb's guys already getting ready to bring that car down and try to get it dialed in. So why don't we figure out exactly what all they're going to have to do to get this car ready as we go down to our ESPN Craftsman Tech Garage and Tim Brewer.
Thanks, Jerry. First of all, they bring the backup car off the transporter. The first thing they're going to do is pull the engine out and change it. But that's going to happen later this afternoon because they've got to get some practice time. They really have to utilize time on the racetrack right now. But the seat configuration, everything that they can possibly have inside the car that's identical to what Tony would say was his perfect race car. I don't know where they ran that other car, but I'd say Indianapolis or something. But there again, they have to change everything. They have to go through the inspection lane first of all. So you're going to see the NASCAR inspectors come over, put another inspection sheet on the dash of the car, and they're going to come back and utilize the serial number on the chassis, see where the car's been run before. Then they're going to put it through the inspection lane, checking all the templates on the car. They're going to pull a fuel cell out of the car, and they have to inspect it. They'll actually lift it out, set it on the ground, run it through a hoop, make sure that the fuel cell, it qualifies to be run here. They're going to check the rear spoiler, the rear wing as far as the spoiler angles, and they have to check all the barcodes on the car, making sure that the certified chassis is up to date. But they've got a lot of work to do, a short time to do it in, and as far as transferring springs and information, they didn't collect a lot in this run, but there again, you're going to see a lot of work going on in Tony Stewart's garage area.
And Tim, I'm sure they're hoping they can get the stability out of this car that they had in the primary car a moment ago. Now, if any team is prepared to handle this kind of stress, it is this one, because this is exactly what happened back in June. Qualifying was rained out, and Tony Stewart was supposed to start on the pole by virtue of point standings, and that they had to go to a backup car because he wrecked the primary car on Saturday. Again, the backup car coming out. And, of course, what happened on Sunday turned out to be very good, though, for one Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart had come from the back of the pack and passed 30 cars in 30 laps, and when the day was done, it was smoke that had smoked him at Pocono. Here's what's left of Tony Stewart's Chevrolet, and obviously you can see the right side. They've almost wiped off the Old Spice Swagger decal. Lap one of practice, but the good news for the Tony Stewart fans that got the backup car already out in the garage area trying to get it dialed in. If you just joined our coverage, here's what happened to the points leader just a moment ago.
This is in the middle of turn 3. See Tony lose the back end of the car, and there's just no room. Hard into the outside wall.
that's a pretty good lick, too. I mean, you felt that one.
Yeah, and you're carrying a lot of speed there. We talk about how flat that corner is, but you carry a lot of speed. Obviously, a little too much at that particular time for the rear tires to grip.
DJ, from a mindset of a driver, how does this affect you when you're in the car and you go out and suddenly the car you're planning on racing on Sunday is history?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and Tony's such a professional that he'll put this behind you. You know it can happen to anybody at any time. The worst thing is right now is you realize you still have almost 2 full practice sessions, and this is your backup car. You don't want anything else to go wrong, because then you have to bring in another car from Charlotte, and so they don't want to get into that situation. But Tony will go out. He did it the last time that they were here. You know, came back and won the race.
You can see this is a beautiful car, and I'm sure they're very prepared, and they have had some experience with this, so it all looks like just as usual. They're just getting everything ready. They'll probably not miss many laps of this practice.
Yeah, and these teams are so prepared, as you said, that they're ready to go with this. This car is set up just like what they were ready to do with their first one. It's ready to go because it was in actually race mode, so they won't have to make a lot of changes, and they'll be there ready to go.
You know, it's a good point. They said back in June when they lost their primary car here in happy hour, it took them less than 10 minutes to get the backup car out and get it ready to be on the racetrack. So that shows a team that's really got got their act together.
And one thing NASCAR does give these guys a little break. They'll check certain things before the car goes on the track, but then they'll wait till after practice to put all the detailed templates and all the other little things that they do. They won't make the team do that before they go on the racetrack.
Yeah, and as you look at this right now, you can see we're still under red flag condition. These guys are sitting here waiting on the track cleanup to be completed. So Tony's actually not losing any time as these guys are working, getting that car ready. He's not losing any time to his competitors, and the way he's running this year, they need a little extra time.
They're just waiting on him to come out there. They're going to wait till he gets his car fixed.
Well, that's only fair.
No, they're ready to go now. Track's cleaned up, and you'll see that 14 roll out here before long.
Tony, we'll start in the back of the pack, but that's not been all bad this year for drivers. In fact, 4 times in 2009, drivers have won in a backup car or from starting in the back of the pack. And it all began with Matt Kenseth in a backup car in Daytona for the 500. Kyle Busch, who was on the pole, by the way, at Las Vegas, had started in the back. Brad Keselowski had an engine change after qualifying 9th, and Tony Stewart back here in June, just 8 weeks ago. So yeah, you can get it done from the back of the field here because these races are so long.
Yeah, and this is a long race, 500 miles. The other thing is this is a racetrack that you have a lot of room to pass. It's not like Indy last week where it was so difficult. We saw Juan Montoya get back in 12th spot with 25 laps to go, could only make up 1 spot. So I think this is a totally different situation because you have a lot more racing room here. The aero side of it's not going to come into play nearly as much.
And, you know, that we keep bringing up the fact that all the turns are different, and that does help, too, because a lot of times you'll have cars and teams that set up, and they're better at one end of the track than others, and that makes for good passing zones as well because you'll have somebody that maybe is better in one turn than the other. We saw even last week, Mark Martin said he was better in turn 2 or coming off turn 2, and Jimmy was better in turn 4. And those are very similar turns. With these big different turns, you have a lot of opportunity for that.
Exactly.
We're seeing the 2 Hendrick cars run together here. Jimmy Johnson going by and Jeff Gordon in this session. You think that's by design?
I'm pretty sure it's probably by Jeff's design. He wants to get out there because Jimmy Johnson just won last week. He knows he's going to be fast here again. Jeff kind of wants to measure up right now. And you like racing or getting out here practicing with your teammates. I think, you know, he feels like Jimmy's somebody he can really trust, and it's a good gauge for him to see where he may be off just a little bit, if indeed he is.
Jimmy Johnson is atop the speed charts so far. Carl Edwards right now 2nd quickest. Hamlin 3rd. Ryan Newman and Casey Kane. By the way, the Hendrick Motorsports cars have finished 1, 2, 5 times this year. There's Carl, who won this race a year ago, and Carl was kind enough to come in and join us in the pit studio yesterday and talk about his 2009 season. And it's just amazing to us that the driver who won 9 times in 2008, the winningest driver in the series, has yet to go to victory lane in a Cup car this year.
Yeah, and he told us a little frustration that he hasn't won, but you could also hear the confidence in his voice that they were very capable of that. And he talked about opportunities they had that were kind of taken away, you know, 300 yards away from winning the race at Talladega before that accident. So it's not like they haven't run well.
And we were talking about that same thing in the Nationwide Series with Carl Edwards just a few weeks ago. And now he's got 2 wins. He won at Milwaukee and then last week at ORP.
Let's watch Carl's hands in the car here and watch what happens as he tries to get this car loaded into the corner.
You can see this is down in turn 1. Like I said, there's 14 degrees of banking you can lean on, but just, that's a little bit of a loose situation there. You can see him turning back to the right and correcting.
You know, he said yesterday in the pit studio, we were talking to him, he said this car, you have to give it just a little more room for just things just like that right there, where the car gets away from you a little bit. You got to be able to catch it. Like, whoa, man, he is he's up the same place Tony was in turn 3. This was in the tunnel turn.
These guys watch this, they're going to tell us not to put the camera on them. We've had it on Tony whenever he crashed, and Carl almost wrecked right there.
You see Jimmy Johnson went by him, and now Carl falls in line behind Jimmy.
You can see Carl gave a little more. You're talking about a little more room. He gave a little more room. He didn't go straight up to that strip of asphalt. He was more in the middle and then kind of eased his way up there.
On this 3/4 of a mile front straightaway, now they no longer shift on this straightaway. How does that impact what a driver does as far as entering turn 1?
Well, it's a lot easier doing it like this. On the other side of it, you always had that as you shifted. You know, you could kind of use that to your advantage of getting the car low down a little bit and not having to use quite as much brake.
Yeah, you see the RPMs right here on the bottom. You see 87, 8,800, up to 9,000 going into this corner.
Yeah, we saw 93 on the front straightaway.
Yeah, you really want to turn these engines around 9,500 anywhere, and you want to do it from about 8,000 to 9,500. That's where they make the most power. Right now, they go so slow in these corners that they would actually want to shift down and move those RPMs up, but NASCAR doesn't allow it. So now you see them dropping down 6,600 RPMs in the middle of this corner.
Yeah, and it's made passing much more difficult. And it's really changed the exit of the corners more than it's changed anything, because you have to make sure you get to the throttle and try to get off, because you don't have the gear to help you accelerate off the corners now.
Here's a team that really needs to be able to get into victory lane this year, the 33 car and Richard Childress Racing. This is Clint Boyer, by the way, who was the highest of the 4 RCR cars in the point standings. He is 16th, and Clint, one of 7 drivers this year that won a year ago that is yet to win in 2009.
He's in the groove right now. He's second fastest on the board, and at a 54.10. That's still about 3/10 slower than our fastest car, Jimmy Johnson. But Jimmy gets out there and gets that clean air right off the bat coming out of the pits, and that's an advantage, even in practice.
Yeah, it sure is. You know, you can hear Clint Boyer talk about that they think things are improving with their race team. The cars are getting better. They're able to drive them a little bit better. You hear he and Kevin Harvick talk about the last 6 or 7 weeks that things are much better. So they do need, if he's going to have any shot at getting himself situated in the chase, then he's going to have some really good runs here in these next 3 or 4 weeks.
Right now, he is outside the bubble in the chase. There's the look at the point spread between 9th and 16th and the average Pocono finish. You see Mark Martin has done awfully well. Clint Boyer is the top of the RCR cars. He is 16th in points. Jeff Burton is 17th, Mears 21st, and Kevin Harvick back in 23rd position. Hard to believe, as good as Kevin Harvick has been and consistent as he has been over the years, that he is barely inside the top 25 in points this year.
Yeah, and all of that hasn't been because they've just been running bad. They've had some races that the handling just hasn't been there for them, but they've also had some pretty good weeks to where they got caught up in accidents or something would happen. So, yeah, we can't just judge everything just by the points position, although that's what you're trying to obtain throughout the year. But there have been some circumstances that have put them there.
It looked like there's a little bit of hope, though, that tide has turned at RCR last week at Indianapolis, where this car finished in the top 10, finished 6th. And both cars right now, you've got Boyer in 2nd on the speed chart, and Harvick's in 5th.
So practice underway at Pocono Raceway, and it began with a bang for Tony Stewart, as Smoke sitting there watching his guys trying to turn up the heat on the backup car and get him on the racetrack to get some laps in. After rain for much of Friday afternoon, which washed away qualifying, they've lined up now for the 5th time in 2009 by point standings. The car's on the track for 2 practice sessions, and it has already been an eventful day for Tony Stewart. On lap 1, it went away in a hurry. Let's go down to Vince Welch.
Well, and Tony Stewart obviously very frustrated with the way his day has begun, is asked to be given a few minutes before he would actually visit with us, so we understand that. This car, we can tell you, though, the backup car that they pulled off the trailer has raced twice for Stewart this season. It ran at California and finished 8th, 3rd at Darlington, so we've had a couple of top 10s with this race car, but certainly not the way the 14 team wanted to get its weekend here at Pocono started, for sure. Even though he went to the back last year, last time here in June, I don't think Tony's seeing the irony in that, guys. Dave?
And Vince, things a little bit more calm down here in the 83 pit for Brian Vickers. Took a quick 2-lap run out on the track and described his car as the grip off being good, but he slides out of the groove in turns 2 and in turn 3. So they made a carburetor change they were planning on anyway, and they also went to the rear end of this car, make some componentry changes. They're trying to get Brian the field that he's looking for. Remember, Brian ran very well here in the June race, ran top 10 solidly all day, and then the fuel mileage bug kind of bit him at the end, and they finished 21st.
Brian Vickers coming off a 5th place finish at Indianapolis. Now 3 straight top 10, 7th at Daytona and Chicago, and 5th at Indy. And a lot still up in the air here with this Red Bull team for 2010. I know Jay Fry going over to meet with the owners in Austria, and still drivers unsigned as far as their future is concerned.
Yeah, really not sure what they're looking at and waiting on there. They've got a very talented young driver in Brian Vickers, and you know, for any success they think maybe they should have had and should be on right now, they need to make sure that they understand that the driver is a big part of that, and for any lack of it, I don't think Brian's been the problem. He's put that car up there and done a terrific job, and I would be signing him on sheet, because if they don't, somebody's going to pick up Brian Vickers. He's an excellent race driver.
Brian leads everybody with 5 poles in 2009. There's his teammate Scott Speed, who came over from Formula One and won in his 4th ever ARCA start, his 6th ever NASCAR Camping World Truck Series start. Of course, qualified on the outside front row beside his teammate at Chicagoland a few weeks ago. Has 1 top 10 finish. That was 5th at Talladega. So a lot of questions to be answered here for Team Red Bull. Here's the 2 car. Kurt Busch for Penske Racing. You talk about a team that's really stepped it up. Stepped it up here in 2009. Been quite a comeback from this team here that missed the chase a year ago.
Yeah, they've really shown that they put in a lot of work and effort. The new engine, I think, has certainly been a big part of that, but they really worked on their chassis too. And I want to go back just a second as we show Kurt here, but they were talking about changing carburetors on the 83. The fuel mileage deal bit them. I think that's probably what they're going to work on in this first session.
I'm sure they are trying some things to get better fuel mileage, and sometimes when you do that, you can hurt the performance a little bit, and so you want to really work on that in practice. You've got to say, okay, what's the best balance here between horsepower and fuel mileage, and sometimes you can try to push that fuel mileage too far and make it where it doesn't really run like you want it. So that's probably what they're working on. They only ran, Vickers only ran 1 lap in practice so far, and he really didn't make a full lap. He just made a partial lap and came in.
We talked about what a difference a year makes for Kurt Busch. A year ago, they finished 18th in the point standings, and right now they sit 4th in the points, and it's been the consistency, guys. See those top 5s, particularly the top 5s and the laps led, that's made a difference in 09.
Yeah, one thing that this team did is they took advantage, like you said, of that new Dodge engine early. So I think that really has helped this team, and they've done a lot of testing at different places too. You obviously can't test at these tracks, but they've done a lot of stuff that's really helped them.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing Kurt Busch in championship form too as a driver. He's really taken this car when they've had a fast race car, run it up front, won a race, led laps and things like that. And then when he hasn't, he's gotten the most points that he possibly can. Vince, you have more on this?
Well, as you know, Dale, this is a track that's very difficult to find a happy place with the race car in all corners of the racetrack. But Kurt says he's really happy with the way it is on the straightaway, really likes it on the straightaway. Says it's tight in the apex in turns 1 and 2, loose in turn 3. You're going to have that certainly with the difference in these corners, but he's really happy with the race car at this point, and he needs a good finish here. He's been 38th and 37th in his last 2 races here, so certainly looking to have a better run tomorrow here at Pocono.
He certainly he has the record here for leading the most laps ever as a Pocono winner. That happened in this race 2 years ago. He led 175 of 200 laps. By the way, that was the first win for he and crew chief Pat Tryson. Here is a car, talking about first wins, here is the 9 car that got back into victory lane for the King, Richard Petty. At Infineon, Casey Kane is a winner here. He won in the spring race back in 2008. And we talked about the importance of the new Dodge engine. This team here has had it since Dover at the end of May, and it's made all the difference in the world for Casey Kane.
Yeah, they incorporated the new engine also with kind of some new chassis stuff they were doing, radiator things they were doing. So the whole package has obviously put them in the right mode here. They've moved from 17th to 8th in the points, really been solid. And I think this weekend he would be someone that we have to look at as being one of the favorites at this track.
Casey right now is 7th overall on the speed charts. There's the King, Richard Petty. Richard Petty Motorsports, born back in January of this year at the merger with Gillette Evernham. Well, it used to be Petty Enterprises, now called RPM. Take a look at even and odd for Casey Kane in his career.
Yeah, big difference right there. A lot more wins in the even years.
Yeah, I'll tell you though, you show that to a driver and he said, yep, we basically only look at stats whenever they benefit you, when they're good for you. You know, don't worry if they're not on your side.
Let's check back in down in the 14 garage and update, see if we can watch what's happening with this car. And again, if you just joined our coverage, the points leader, Tony Stewart, on the very first lap of this practice, the car just slipped out from under him in turn 3 and bounced off the wall. They've had to go, this is the backup car, and it is just like what happened back in June when he had to go to a backup car on the final day of practice. Started at the back of the pack, which he will do now on Sunday, and he passed 30 cars. I went back and counted them. He passed 30 cars in 30 laps on the beginning of the race in June. And of course, ended up getting up there and winning a race. So Tony didn't waste any time hustling toward the front.
He's not going to waste any time Sunday either. He's going to get this car right, and I expect him to be up there short order.
So just a few minutes. This team has been ready, so they're going to get Tony in this car and try to get him on the racetrack. He was on the racetrack for one lap, or almost a lap, and here's what happened when they waved the green flag for practice. In turn 3, he bounced it off the wall, and suddenly the Old Spice Chevy is pretty scratched up. And so they had to bring out the backup car to get it ready, and now Tony is climbing in that one to have it on the track when we come back. Practice continuing at Pocono Raceway. We've had 40 of the 43 cars that are here on the track thus far. Jimmy Johnson is atop the speed charts. Clint Boyer, Carl Edwards, Jeff Gordon, and Kevin Harvick are the top 5. Now here's the 11 car of Denny Hamlin, who won both races here as a rookie in 2006. We see Denny on the racetrack. We need to pass along to Denny and to his family our condolences on the passing of his grandmother. Denny was very, very close to his grandmother, and I know it's very difficult for him to climb in the car and try to focus on what's happening here when you lose someone so close to you. And also David Hoots, the race director for NASCAR, lost his mom this week, and David has been a close friend of all of us for many, many years. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Hoots family as well as the Hamlin family. Denny.
He came here as a rookie, and one of those first 2 races, it was like, wow, who's ever going to beat this guy? I mean, he just looked incredible. He spun out one time and came back and won the race.
This race has been, this track has been swept 6 times over the years, and look at the names that Denny Hamlin joins. Bobby Allison, awesome Bill Elliott. You see Tim Richmond, who was so good, Labonte, Jimmy Johnson, and most of those guys were NASCAR champions.
Yeah, that's a stellar list right there. I don't know if any of those guys got their first win here, though.
No,
that's what's so surprising. This is a very difficult track, and you come here as a rookie first time and do what he did was incredible.
Yeah, he said he used the game to do it and learn the racetrack, and I didn't know the game could teach you that much about it. Well, I'm not very good at those video games, but yeah, you talk about that. Denny Hamlin, he's in there with a group that's all going to be in the Hall of Fame one day.
And here's Mark Martin, has never won here, and that's just incredible to me, too.
Yeah, that has to be the most baffling stat that there is in this sport, I think, that he's raced here 45 times and hasn't gone to victory lane. 6 times he's finished second. I mean, he has just an incredible record. 19 top 5s in those 45. You would have thought somewhere along the way that luck would have been a little bit on his side.
You know, Mark Martin had never won at Chicagoland. He checked that one off a few weeks ago, and he had not won at Indianapolis and almost checked that one off last week. So this is the kind of year where Mark can make up for some of those tracks where he has not been able to visit victory lane.
And that's exactly why he came back to do this, you know, have that opportunity to win races. You know, he doesn't want to talk much about the opportunity to get in the chase or win the championship, and he wants to talk about winning races.
Yeah, he's having so much fun. I spent some time with him last night, and he's just enjoying life right now and enjoying this success, and he loves his team, his crew chief, Alan Gustafson. He can't say enough good things about him. And one thing he did bring up, he says, you know, how good everything is going this year, and it's just been a dream season. He can't believe that he's still having to really worry about getting in this top 12, and it's still a big concern right now for this team to make sure that they make the chase because they've got those wins and those bonus points to capitalize on it if they do.
Yeah, I like my chances with somebody like Mark Martin, who understands the situation here right now. They have the 4 victories. Yeah, they'd like to win more races, but he knows his job right now is to get this car and this team in the chase, and I think that he's obviously very capable of doing that.
Well, Mark has finished second here 6 times, and one of his teammates in Hendrick Motorsports in the 88 car, Dale Earnhardt Jr., has finished second here twice, in 2001 and 2007. And they had a really good run going in Indianapolis until the engine went away. They looked like they were going to have probably their best finish in a month, at least a top 10, if not a top 5.
Yeah, it's probably the best run they've had in quite a while. And as you can see, there's David Reagan. Probably 2 disappointments right there, I would have to say, this season. We expected a lot more from both of these guys. Dale Jr., who hopefully will make things happen here. And David Reagan, we talked about this would be the year of him getting in the chase, winning his first race with this UPS Ford. Just hasn't been that kind of season. You can put all the pieces together, but you have to go out there and race and make it happen. And neither one's been able to do that this year.
Let's go down to Dave Burns.
And this is Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s second run of the day. The first run was a 6-lap run, after which he provided this feedback to his team.
10 forward, so you're tight in the middle of 1 and loose off. You're loose through the tunnel, and you're tight in the middle of 3. Yep. Doesn't feel like it has any sway bar in it going through the tunnel. It just, as soon as I look at that corner, it just flops over on the right front.
Now, certainly the sway bar did not leave the car, only in the tunnel turn. Tim Brewer stands by in our Craftsman Tech Garage. Tim, if your driver told you all that, what would you do for him?
Well, first things first, Dave. The immediate problem is the transfer of weight. When you go off in a corner, the anti-roll bar that sits right in front of the car probably started off with a little bit smaller bar, but he's going to increase that size of the bar. What that's going to do is actually keep the car from transferring weight from the left side over to the right front. But in essence, what he's actually doing, again, he's actually keeping the air dam down on the left side. When the car transfers, this actually comes up, lets air into the car, so he's kind of like multiplying the problem. But by helping it mechanically with the sway bar, you're going to help it aerodynamically with the other aspect, and then it's a weight balance thing. I'm going to go back and work with some wedges, some shock absorbers, but the anti-roll bar is really going to help that problem in the tunnel turn.
You cannot believe how big some of the sway bars are that these cars are running. Just down there last week at Indianapolis, I saw some of the absolute most huge sway bars. They were almost 3 inches in diameter.
Yeah. You see the splitter right here that Tim was talking about. That left front would have been coming up, and that could have been causing some of his push. The sway bar is actually probably going to tighten the car up in the center of the corner mechanically, so you have to be careful in not making it too tight because you already had that situation. Most of the guys that I talked to, the last couple of times they've been here, they talked about that was a situation that they fought, was that tightness in the center, but then they would be extremely loose off. And every time they tried to make it rotate a little bit better in the center, then they got extremely loose on the exit of the corner.
This is the same car they used at Indianapolis where they qualified third, best starting spot of the year, and they have loaded their guns to come here to Pocono because for lots of reasons. They want to get into victory lane, but also the headquarters for their corporate sponsor AMP, which is PepsiCo, is just about 125 miles from here east of Pocono in Purchase, New York. So a lot of folks coming on down from the headquarters of the primary sponsor to watch Dale Earnhardt Jr. maybe get to victory lane for the first time in 2009. Let's check in on the Rocket Man, Ryan Newman. Let's see what Ryan's doing. He's doing this year. He's one of those 7 drivers. Hard to believe that won a year ago. Hasn't been to victory lane yet this year.
If this whole Stewart-Haas organization has been really on fire this year, I'll be surprised if we don't see this car in victory lane soon.
Yeah, they really got on a roll. They started off a little bit shaky at the start of the season, but every week they were improving their finishing position, and it looked like they were going to go to victory lane a couple of times. So I think that, I think right now they're probably in that chase mode. Where we got a good spot here. Let's make sure that we do all things right and keep ourselves positioned in that top 12.
And Andy, could Ryan right now be gathering some information to help his teammate Tony Stewart, who's still in the garage area and not on the racetrack?
Yeah, he's definitely gathering information, not just for himself, but also that 14 team will be looking at all the notes, and they sit down after every practice and go over everything. So that's the benefit of having these multi-car teams, is that even when you're having a little bit of problem, like we see the 14 still in the garage and not making laps, they're not losing everything. They're still gathering data from with their other team, and they can take that and put it back to use here for the second practice and tomorrow.
The other good thing in Tony's situation and with Ryan, who's down in the 25th spot right now on the speed chart, but they also will have a meeting after this is over, and their alliance with Hendrick Motorsports allows them to see what Jimmy Johnson, Mark Martin, Jeff Gordon, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. all did, and if there's anything they can incorporate there. So that's where this alliance that they have really comes in handy whenever you're missing times like this.
Now you can see just how Ryan Newman looks like he is wrestling that car through the turns. I mean, that's a physical thing. I mean, he is working that car.
Yeah, this is a hard racetrack. It always has been physically because you have to work a lot with these 3 different corners. But with these cars, it's become even more increasingly difficult. You can see how close they get to that exit. You know, you always used all of that before they put the safer barrier in, and now you have, you know, about 2.5 feet less than what you had before. But you can really see these guys work the steering wheel at this racetrack.
I've seen drivers time and again mention the fact that the most difficult turn in all of NASCAR, they say, is the tunnel turn at Pocono. So it was tough enough in years past, but now they've added that concrete curbing on the inside of turn 2, and that, they said, really makes it so line sensitive.
Yeah, you talk about how difficult it is, but it is as much fun too. If you get a car that'll go through there, you can feel speed through that corner as much as anywhere that you go because of the amount of speed that you have to carry, and then get back to the throttle and drive the car off of that corner and literally come within inches of that wall. Man, that is just a sheer blast as a driver when you can have something like that.
You see right here with that curbing he was talking about right on the inside, but it seemed like that took away a little bit of the racing groove, almost narrowed the racetrack up when they put that curb there.
Yeah, between that and the safer barrier on the outside on the exit of that, you have a much narrower corner than what you used to have.
So about 30 minutes from the time they were able to get the primary car back to the garage area, Tony rolls out with the backup car onto the racetrack here at Pocono. We'll see what he can do here, trying to get this car dialed in.
I'm just going to venture to guess that this first lap will be a little slower than what its other one was going to be.
Yeah, float this one in this time and get a little feel for it.
But you know, literally, Tony's such a professional and such a good driver and has such car control. You don't expect to see things like that happen. So he's going to go out here and he's going to, you know, go at this hard. He knows that he's got probably less than 10 minutes here to make it happen. He's got to get a good feel and be able to tell them so they can make some changes in between the sessions.
And, you know, one question people would have is why would you run the car so hard in practice that you would actually crash the thing, you know, because this is just practice. But the reason is if you don't do that, if you don't run the car like that, you're not going to expose the issues or problems that you can fix or make better with that car and make the car faster. You have to push it to its limit, and sometimes you push it a little past.
Okay, you're Darian Grubb on top of the hauler watching your driver in the backup car. What's going through your mind right now?
He's thinking, okay, let's just make a lap here and see what we got. Okay, and then he'll start really settling down, and the driver will give him some input, and they'll go to work on this thing. But right now he's thinking, okay, this is the only car we've got left. let's don't bang it up. He's not worried about it, though. When you got Tony Stewart in behind the wheel, you know he's not going to make that mistake twice.
Yeah, and your biggest concern would be running over something and something happening to your car, then maybe cutting a tire.
Well, qualifying was rained out here yesterday, so they were due to line up by point standings, which would have put Tony Stewart on the pole, but he will start last now because of having to go to a backup car. But we will have qualifying coming your way from Iowa for the NASCAR Nationwide Series cars today, 1 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN2. And then at 4 o'clock Eastern Time today, the inaugural nationwide race at the new Iowa Speedway, and they are expecting a packed house. They brought in extra grandstands. That broadcast presented by GoDaddy.com on ESPN at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. And then tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern, NASCAR Sprint Cup Series action here at Pocono, presented by Old Spice, and beginning with NASCAR Countdown. NASCAR Now pre-race edition presented by 5 Hour Energy at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and then wrapping up the weekend tomorrow night at 10 Eastern. First practice of 2 that are coming your way live here from Pocono Raceway on Saturday. And you know, there is on the right side of your screen is the 42 car of Juan Pablo Montoya. He led more laps last week at Indianapolis Motor Speedway than he had led in his previous 92 races, and looked to be on his way to the biggest victory in his stock car career until the irony of ironies in Indianapolis, where everybody chases speed, he gets caught speeding on pit road.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. They had almost a 5-second lead as he came onto pit road for the last time, but was caught just over the limit. And, you know, that's just things we documented a number of times and said you have to do everything perfect to win that race, and they had one little slip up.
And you have to put everything right on the line. I mean, you got to put it up right at the edge, everything. You drive the car to the edge, you get to set up to the edge, you push the fuel mileage to the edge. They pushed the speed on pit road to the edge, and just a little too close and actually stepped over the line, just barely.
And he kept talking about the lights, and he was a green light. What does all that mean? Why don't we explain it to you by going down to our ESPN Craftsman Tech Garage and Tim Brewer.
Thanks, Jerry. Here's what we're going to show you, folks. When you come off pit road, into the entrance, you're down around this 2,500 number. Well, NASCAR is going to give you a speed, and this is the caution area right here. Once you get past the yellow, that's 55 miles an hour. Now you get into the green lights. That's 56, 57, 58, 59, and these represent 100 RPMs, which is about a 1 mile an hour. But once you get to that last green light, that's in the danger zone. Now you've exceeded 60 miles an hour. And Juan Pablo Montoya, when he come in at pit road speed, that was great. But up here, there's your margin. I would have not gotten any faster than that. But like Andy says, everybody wants to run 59.98 miles per hour, and that's great until you get caught. But all the competitors, they wanted this new system with NASCAR to take them out of the equation of the stopwatch. Well, they got it. Now they enforce it. So, you know, it's just one of those situations. They're going to have to live with it.
So he was seeing green, thank you, Tim, throughout the pit stop, and then he was seeing red when NASCAR called him back in because he...
Yeah, but he said when he got caught, he said, I had 3 green lights. So that's what he meant. He was talking about those lights on the dash. You can see right here, they're getting ready to start the car up. You see the red, the other gauges are blinking red. That means they're out of range. He's got the car shut off right now. When they started up, that's Casey Kane's car. They're putting the winning net up. That's a great little innovation for the drivers to be able to see that. Instead of having to read those gauges right to the letter, they have that red and yellow and green warning light system.
Yeah, and yeah, far be it from me to question Juan Pablo. He'd gotten himself in that position, but you know, in a situation like that, and I'm sure that if he's in that situation here on Sunday, that he'll back that down just a little bit, knowing that you can't push it every time right to the limit, because under green was the worst possible situation that he could have with that. We see Tony Stewart back on the racetrack here with this backup car. He's came out first lap, put it up in 21st spot. He's still sliding that baby around.
You know, that's the other thing. You have a car that's loose, it'll make some speed, but the driver has to be able to hang on to that and take advantage of it. You really have to hang that thing out there and risk wrecking the car almost every lap.
I think with these cars, that's the one thing these guys fight at this racetrack, where there's not a lot of mechanical grip out there, because this racetrack is very worn, and that's why they use that one patch up in 3 that has a little bit more grip. But they really fight trying to get these cars on the exit of the corner to have some grip without hurting the center of the corner.
One car that's having some issues back in the garage area is the 17 car. Dave, what's going on down there?
I want to give you an update on his weekend, guys. Yesterday, during their shortened practice session, they used their June setup with some tweaks, and they tried an option setup after that. They started today with that option setup, trying to, quote-unquote, make it work, according to crew chief Drew Blickensderfer. But it hasn't worked, and Matt said it was very loose into the corners, like something was wrong with the car. So they made some changes back to more their baseline setup, which was the June type of setup. The changes included a gear in the back end, and I guess that was my question for the driver and crew chief. Could the wrong gear and when you get out of the gas contribute to a loose into the corner situation?
I don't know that the wrong gear. I think that they could possibly have a problem with the gear that would create a situation of being loose as you got in. And sometimes with your car and your setup, you find situations where you have to roll out of the throttle instead of coming out of it abruptly, and that making your car loose, Andy.
Well, when they change the gear, they're also changing the locking mechanism that locks the 2 rear tires together. It's called a locker or a ratchet. And what that does, it locks those 2 rear wheels together on the drive off with power applied to the rear wheels. And when you get out of the throttle, it actually will unlock and let the rear end have a little differential to make the turns, because you don't want those tires running exactly the same speed when you start turning the car. For more on this little innovation, I guess you call it, Tim Brewer down in the Craftsman Tech Garage, he can explain a little bit more of this.
Andy, this is a Detroit ratchet right here, what we've got, and all the Ford gears run with it. But this is an exploded version that we got from CNR Products. But these springs actually engage the gears. But the way the thing works with the rear end, as you're pulling, you've got both wheels pulling, both wheels going forward. But when you back off the gas to go down in the corner, it has to release. And this is traveling a greater distance than this. That's the reason you can't have a solid axle in the rear of the car with both wheels pulling. You'd have to have a phenomenal amount of stagger to get through the corner. But it can affect the car, because when the driver applies the gas back to it, this wheel actually turns 360 degrees, 1 revolution before the gears engage again. And that's the purpose of getting around the corner. But that power, if those springs don't engage that ratchet, you're going to come off the corner with 1 wheel pulling rather than 2.
Thank you, Tim. We can tell you there's one more change this team is definitely going to make, and that is in sponsorship. It was announced this week that longtime sponsor Crown Royal, been with Roush Fenway since 2003, will move on as the primary sponsor of this car, the 17 car in 2010. Of course, DeWalt has been a part of that team for a long time, announcing a week and a half ago they would be going away. So now the 17 becomes the Crown Royal car next year. Here's the 18 car of Kyle Busch, and he has struggled here at Pocono and coming off a frustrating 38th place finish last week at Indianapolis, which cost him 4 positions in the point standings.
Yeah, I think this is a huge weekend for Kyle Busch and his team. This hasn't been one of the racetracks. Even last year, as they were winning at a lot of racetracks, they weren't performing very well on this flat type track here. So if they can have a good weekend here, he's got some really good opportunities coming up to win some races and get himself back into that top 12.
Last 3 times Kyle Busch has come to Pocono, folks, he finished 22nd in June. He finished 36th here in this race last August, and he finished 43rd in June of 2008. Ouch, Dave.
Interesting quick conversation I had this morning with his crew chief, Steve Addington, was about this weekend, and you know, he said we really need a good run. Now, we hear that all the time, but they need to manage the days when they're not racing for the win, and Steve's reference to that was the guy who had such a great car last week, Juan Pablo Montoya. He said Juan's been doing that all year. He's doing it. And remember, Juan's words to the media all week were, we're working on the chase, we're working on the chase. Then he almost dominated in one Indy. But Steve Addington has been impressed by Juan Pablo Montoya, how on the days when he couldn't fight for the win, he didn't fight. And he's so far in chase contention.
He is in contention. And one thing I want to mention about Kyle Busch, guys, he did not win at Indianapolis last week in the Nationwide or the Cup car on the track. But I think Kyle Busch won a lot of fans with how he handled all the adversity off the track with regard to interviews on Saturday night and Sunday, and, of course, a sit-down with Marty Smith.
Yeah, it was a great interview, very impressive. And again, he did handle the situations very good, and I think he's got a different mindset. And, you know, that's just something that comes with maturity, and I'm sure that Joe and J.D. Gibbs have had a big hand in that too, because that's exactly what they're really good at, is the people skills and getting Kyle to understand that. He has a tremendous amount of driving ability, maybe second to none out here, but there's some other things that he can work on that will help him with all of that, and he's sure showing that right now, and that'll help him get back to the chase, Andy.
I said last week, I felt like things I heard, some quotes I saw written that he had came from Kyle Busch, that might have been a turning point last week for him, and really getting to be a leader with this team and helping them lead, you know, back to the chase, and to be when they do make the chase, then to be an actual contender, because they're capable of doing this.
Yeah, he needs a turning point for this year. Look at what a difference a year makes there for these guys. You see Kyle Busch, Dale Jr., Jeff Burton, where they were 1, 2, 3 a year ago. And right now, none of those 3 are in the chase in the top 12. We told you about the interview. We mentioned the interview with Marty Smith a week ago, where Kyle Busch really spoke honestly and sincerely from the heart. We're going to share that with you here coming up in a few minutes, as we are just about to the completion here, and we are at the completion of this first practice session. And we will come back with a little discussion and that interview, and then we're going to stay here live and cover happy hour from Pocono Raceway. Cars finishing up the first session. Jimmy Johnson atop the speed charts. Boyer, Edwards, Gordon, and Kevin Harvick. We invite you to join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Live coverage for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series race at Pocono, presented by Old Spice, beginning at 1 o'clock Eastern Time on ESPN. Back in just a moment. Back at Pocono Raceway, sun is shining, and the first of 2 practice sessions has concluded for the NASCAR Sprint Cup cars. A lot of work going on down in the 14 camp. We'll tell you, and we'll show you again what happened to Tony Stewart at the beginning of this session. Let's show you how they wound up on the speed charts in this session. And DJ, no surprise, Jimmy Johnson, the quickest of all.
No, he's that first car out there and really uses that clean air to get out there and get going. I think one thing that I look at here as we go down the list, Clint Boyer there in second, Kevin Harvick in fifth. We'll see Jeff Burton was up in the 11th spot, and Casey Mears in 13th. So I think that says a lot about what RCR is doing to get their cars back up there. See Mark Martin back in the 10th spot. I think he'll be a big factor tomorrow in trying to get his first victory here.
The big story, though, in the first session was what happened to Tony Stewart, our points leader and supposed pole sitter, because of points here on Sunday. When the cars rolled out, Tony goes out of turn 1, off of turn 2, and entering turn 3 on the very first lap of practice, this happened.
Yeah, you can see he just got the back end got away from him a little. He was in the groove there, but the back end just got away. He was into the wall and had to bring the backup car out.
It took him officially about 34.5 minutes to get the backup car out, unloaded in the race, back into the garage area through inspection. It had already been pre-inspected by NASCAR, and get the final details set up and get Tony back on the racetrack. Now, when he went back out, DJ, he hammered the throttle.
He didn't waste any time. His first lap was 21st quickest, and you would think that maybe he would have been a little bit easier on the throttle than that, just taking his time to check things out. But that's Tony Stewart and back out and ready to go. So they actually got out and made about 11 laps in that backup car.
So we're continuing in that camp as well as over here in the Jimmy Johnson camp, fresh off that Brickyard 400 victory, Jimmy's 3rd win of the year. And let's update what they're doing. Vince?
Jimmy Johnson just pulled into the garage area, hopped out of the car, and made a quick dash to the hauler to visit with Chad Knaus, and he told me the car is really good. Had a nice smile on his face. Of course, it's atop the speed chart. Every now and then that can be deceiving, but there was nothing deceptive about his reaction to how good that race car was during that practice session. Of course, he's won here twice before, swept in 2004, and coming off the win last week at the Brickyard. So really rolling right now for Jimmy Johnson. Dave?
Vince, I want to talk about a nice little recovery for Clint Boyer. Yesterday during their shortened practice, he made 2 sort of half runs, according to the team, in a car that was not very good. They didn't get hardly anything done yesterday in terms of what they wanted to know. Today, 2nd fastest on the board. They made some major changes on this car, and Clint much happier with it, and the car much happier around Pocono. Doc?
So Clint Boyer and his team really trying to get into victory lane and just trying to get some momentum, as you said, from the team that struggled here thus far in 2009. There's Kyle Busch coming off the 38th place finish at Indianapolis. He is 6th on the speed charts right now after the first session. Now, last week, Kyle Busch had a tough week on the racetrack and maybe a tough week off, but he really opened up his heart and was very open and honest with some answers as he sat down and spoke with our Marty Smith.
From your perspective, what is the public view of Kyle Busch? What is the public persona of Kyle Busch?
From my viewpoint, I'm in everybody's mind, whether it's good, whether it's bad. I take pride in the fans that recognize that and see who I am and follow me for what I've shown, or for my desire to try to go out there and win everything there is to win. You know, it's those people to me that I feel a strong tie with. And yet it's those people also that don't like that aspect of me, who see me as arrogant or with an attitude or whatever. That
Are you arrogant? Do you have an attitude?
I very well could be, you know? I mean, yeah, I have an attitude at times, but I think that's more so brought out in my desire.
I want to read you an excerpt from a column written by ESPN's Rick Riley this week about Tiger Woods and his insatiable desire to win. Quote, I remember Tiger's dad, Earl, telling a story about one day when Tiger was just a kid. He was throwing his clubs around in a fuming fit when his dad said something like, Tiger, golf is supposed to be fun. And Tiger said, Daddy, I want to win. That's how I have fun. How do you relate to that?
That's coming from a 7-year-old boy, which maybe sometimes I've acted like a 7-year-old boy, you know? To me, it's more about winning than anything else. My competitive desire, my whole life is surrounded of just trying to win, trying to be the best. Why are you here if you're not winning? You know, I feel like I'm almost running scared for my job, because if I'm not here winning races, then how am I going to keep sponsors happy? How am I going to keep my ride? How am I going to keep going on in this career of driving race cars, where ultimately it's about winning? I've been here, I don't even know how long, 5, 6 years, whatever it's been, and I've won however many races, but I've also lost how many races, you know?
But only one guy can win.
Only one, that's very true, but it's wanting to be that guy. To me, second is the first loser, and it's that last word that just sticks in your head, that you were a loser that day, you know, that you want to win. If you win, you're a winner.
That might be one thing that maybe frustrates some of the fans that don't cheer for you, is this guy wins all the time. He wins all the time. Why isn't he grateful?
I look at the guys in this sport now like Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, and what they've been able to accomplish over the years, and I want to be those guys. I want to be better than those guys.
What's it going to take to do that?
A lot of hard work, becoming smarter, a better person, a good leader, having people jump on your shoulders and allow you to carry them all the way up there.
What kind of leader have you been so far?
Haven't been great. I feel like I've had team guys that have supported me and have been behind me. Maybe none that would take a bullet for me.
Really? What do you have to do to convince those guys to be willing to take a bullet for you?
Really, I don't think it's race wins. I think it's just pulling the group together and not only having them rally, but rallying together and getting in this chase and propelling them to a championship. And for me to become a better leader and somebody that those guys are looking up to for somebody to follow.
Let's talk about the media a minute. One thing that built this sport and made it so popular was that instant access. You get in a wreck, we're right there with the microphone. It seems bothersome to you. You seem bothered by it. Why?
It's not that I'm bothered by the fact that they're there right after a wreck or something that you get out of the car, but you know, sometimes it's the questions they ask. You know, it's like, well, what happened? I'm like, y'all just saw it. To be fair, you know, maybe there's assumptions out there that I don't like the media, but that's not true. I've got friends in the media.
You're watching a replay of a race on TV or an interview that you've done on TV, maybe catch it. Do you ever see that and think, what the hell was I thinking when I said that?
I see it in a lot of other guys, so of course I see it in myself too. You look foolish sometimes, but man, in the heat of the moment, you just can't think of anything but being mad or being frustrated. There's always that, well, why? What could I have done better? Where did things go wrong? It's me needing to do a better job. You know, I've caused some of the issues myself and brought upon issues myself.
Like, what's a better job? Answering a question when you face adversity, is that a better job?
That's a better job for one. Body language, posture. Hey, what's up, Marty? How you doing? You know? I mean, just, you know, and that goes back to more of me.
But
you know,
is that you? Are you that? Is that who you are when you're not at the racetrack?
If I can slap the competitiveness off my shoulder for a minute, that's who I am.
Is that the hardest part of your job, from your perspective?
It's not being fake. See, there's a fine line there.
Is there a lot of fake in NASCAR?
I wouldn't say that. I didn't say that.
I know, I did. I'm asking you the question.
I don't think so. I think it's just a lot of people do a better job at being able to turn themselves. To me, you know, my life is on the racetrack. I'm solely focused on trying to run better, to be competitive, to win races, to compete for the championship, and the rest of the stuff will take care of itself if I'm winning races. Ultimately, that's not the case, and trying to realize that and learn that to become better with the sponsors, the fans, and give everybody a little bit more, then you'll be here a long time.
That was about as open and honest as I've ever heard Kyle Busch. He talks about we have a driver who has so much desire and so much intensity. And DJ talks about wanting to do a better job. And I think that was a great start right there, wanting to do a better job, being true to himself, but also trying to do a better job when he has to face adversity and disappointment.
Yeah, a lot of truth in what he says there, and now that he understands a lot of that, great job by Marty Smith and by Kyle Busch. If he can continue that, then we're going to see a different young man. We know he has the talent. I'll give him one thing. Richard Petty won the most races in this series. 200 races he won. He started over 1,200. That means he lost at least 5 times more than what he won. You have to learn to put things in perspective. Every day is not going to go as you want it. It's the guys that handle those days that are the best. Richard Petty was a 7-time champion. You look at Dale Earnhardt. He didn't have every day was his greatest day. You put those in perspective. That's when you get guys to get on your back, and they'll take that bullet for you, as Kyle said. That's what you want them surrounding you. You know, you're going to make mistakes on the racetrack as a driver. Those guys are going to make mistakes in the pits. You're going to have failures. But as a team, you rally from those. You become a champion by making good days out of bad days and getting these guys to rally. So he's on the right track here. We can only hope that he gets that attitude to go up with the talent that he has, and then it's no telling what he can achieve.
That driver has won 32 major NASCAR races since the beginning of last year. Let's visit with Kyle Busch. Dave?
And we were watching his team move a whole lot of lead around. I'm sure they were just putting it back back where it belongs. Steve told me this morning he needed about a 10th in speed. He needed you to fix. He needed to fix a loose exit for you. How close did you guys get?
Well, the track started out pretty green from last night's rain and everything, and so we were good off the start. I felt like, just a little free, and we really didn't change a whole lot. We just kind of worked on the tight center and left the loose off alone, but now the track's been rubbering up, the track's been getting tighter and slowing down a lot. So I feel like we're falling behind a little bit here, but the guys brought a brand new car out here and everything, so it was right good off the truck, just trying to make it better.
You gave the green M&M just a little bit of a scare and a scrape over there on the back. What happened there?
It was yesterday. First practice. I was actually on my way in. I was rolling through turn 2 and missed my apex in turn 2 and got a little wide off the corner there, and knew I should have just gave him turn 2 up, and come in, but I tried to get through there a little bit, see what I could get, but no big deal.
Strange things happen on a racetrack. Kyle is 6 quick in that session. Going to run a few more laps here in just a few minutes, guys.
Kyle Busch trying to get things turned around here in this little skid he's been on, and obviously they're getting closer and closer, the car getting dialed in. His best finish here was 4th the very first time he came here. That is the lone top 5 he has at Pocono Raceway. Lots of motorsports coverage to come your way here later in the day. We will have qualifying from Iowa Speedway and NASCAR Nationwide Series action, 1 o'clock Eastern time on ESPN2. Marty Reed, Rusty Wallace and the gang. And then tonight at 4 o'clock Eastern time, I should say this afternoon, from Iowa, nationwide action presented by GoDaddy.com, the inaugural nationwide race there at the new Speedway out in Newton, Iowa. Our flag-to-flag coverage for the NASCAR Sprint Cup cars coming your way tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern time, presented by Old Spice on ESPN, beginning with NASCAR Countdown. Alan Bestwick, Brad Doherty, and the boys. And, of course, pre-race edition for NASCAR Now, presented by 5 Hour Energy, 10 a.m. Eastern, and the follow-up edition at 10 o'clock in the evening. When we come back, a couple of crew chiefs in the NASCAR Craftsman Tech Garage. Back at Pocono Raceway, there are the Stewart-Haas teammates, Tony Stewart, Ryan Newman, talking about the first practice session and what's going to come up here in the final session or happy hour at Pocono Raceway. And in the back of the 14 car, the backup car, they are changing the gear, trying to get this car dialed in. A lot goes on between the end of the first session and the beginning of the second session or happy hour. And for more on what they're going to do, why don't we go down to our ESPN Craftsman Tech Garage and our 2 championship crew chiefs, Tim Brewer and Andy Petrie.
Yeah, thanks, Doc. I came down here and kind of horned in on Brewer's little garage area down here. We're kind of discussing what you do between practice sessions, what these crew chiefs are doing and the drivers. They're down there going over some notes from the first one. They've got just a few minutes, not a lot of time, but this is an opportunity for them to say, okay, we're not going to lose any track time, so we can spend a little bit extra time changing things like slugs in the front suspension, A-frames. You can change some of the geometry things, change some spring combinations, and then what you want to do is you want to set that car up to be adjustable, so you put these spring rubbers in there so you can put them in or take them out during the race and make a lot of changes there. But there's other changes that take a little bit of time that Tim can maybe explain to us.
Well, Andy, what we're going to do, we threw a lot of stuff at it during, the practice. We can move the weight distribution from front to rear. We can change air pressure. Like Andy says, we can change a lot of springs. But what we didn't do, we didn't have an opportunity to put the car up on scales, check the nose weight, check the cross, and reestablish the roof height, the quarter panel heights. There's a lot of things you don't have time to do. So you're basically throwing things at it like front sway bar and shock absorbers, but you don't have a chance to go back and reestablish ride heights and make sure that you've got that weight in 0.1% of what you'd like to have the nose weight as well as the cross, and that's what we're trying to reestablish right now.
And other things, Tim, that they can do is they put things on that car in that first practice that maybe they didn't like, but they didn't have time to change it back. So they go back and take all that off, and then they get this notebook back out and say, okay, which things did work? Let's go down that road just a little bit farther.
Well, it's just like gear selection. When we say gear selection, we're talking about the differential at the rear of the car. And NASCAR allows us to have a 380-to-1 ratio or a 389-to-1. Now, if we decide to change that, naturally we need to pull a hubcaps off, pull the axles out. You're going to have a drain pan beneath, and what's going to happen, you're going to take these 10 bolts off, uncouple the dry shaft, and you're going to pull the gear out. But, you know, we've changed those things. We've had a lot of practice, believe me, up under these cars. But it's very important because if you decide to go to the lower gear ratio, when the tires slow down, the car's going to accelerate up off the corner better, and it's going to be a better process as far as that. But fuel mileage, Andy, if we get in that gig, man, I'm going to wish I had that 380 gear in the car.
Yeah, that's the thing. You want to have that thing where it turns as few RPMs as possible to make the power. And if you do that, you're going to save some fuel. But you come up here, and this is where these guys will take these carburetor bowls off, and they'll change the jets, and they'll change it where they can get less fuel, try to make that thing stretch just a little bit farther.
What Andy's talking about, another thing we can do, like he said, we can control the jets. But right here, this is the accelerator pump, and you have to have the primary accelerator pump to get off the corner. But the secondaries over here, we've got a secondary pump on the back side, and that opens up another bucket of worms because we can actually remove the accelerator pump on the secondary because you don't have to have that, because once you crack the throttle, you put enough fuel in it to get the car rolling, you're pulling fuel out of the boosters, so you don't necessarily have to have that, and that way you can have just a little bit better fuel mileage.
Hey guys, you know, we talked about how Mark Martin was able to win the race at Michigan by saving fuel, and he said what he did is coming off the corner, he would mash the accelerator wide open just for a couple seconds to get the momentum and then back it way down at about half throttle. Andy, what's he doing there with regard to what's going on in the carburetor?
Well, Doc, when they have this throttle wide open right here, it's just pulling all the air through these tubes that pull the fuel in. Now, if he can back that off just a little bit, it's going to throttle that airflow down, and it's going to pull less fuel through these boosters. And that's what he was trying to do. I actually have seen some of the drivers like Mark Martin at Michigan where, no, I'm sorry, it was actually Tony Stewart here at Pocono the last race. He was clutching the car trying to make more fuel mileage. He would push the clutch in, and just basically he can shut these valves completely when you push the clutch in, and then the engine's not dragging the car down. And then when he gets to the corner, they'll just ease that clutch back out, and then RPMs pick back up.
And that's literally rolling through the corner. But still yet, if you know, the small rule of thumb is if you got ponies, you have to feed them. Now, if you got 860 horsepower and you're running wide open maximum throttle, it's taking a lot of fuel. But like Andy says, under the caution flags and to save a lot of fuel, when Mark comes off the corner, he might be wide open, but then he's going to roll out. But what you can also do is reach over. When you're wide open, cut that ignition switch off. You're not burning any fuel at that point in time, and you're saving a lot of fuel, enhancing the fuel mileage considerably.
So lots of different ways to get better fuel mileage. There's the 99 car. How good is Carl Evers? We saw what he did last year at Texas. He was able to go so much further than anybody else. And DJ, drivers are different, I guess. Some guys can and some guys can't. And if you can save fuel mileage at a place like Pocono, you got a real good shot of being in victory lane on Sunday.
Yeah, it gives you a much better option if it comes down to that. But the answer to all of that really is to have a good handling race car that can roll through the center of the corner, and you don't have to use as much throttle. But all of those were great examples of what you do. And as Tim said, feeding the ponies, I think, is what he was doing. So, yeah, with Robert Yates engines that I had years ago, you had to be really careful with that because they had plenty of that.
Yeah, I'm glad he didn't say something about milking the pigs because that would have been bad. At Pocono, you got to have fast cars and good fuel mileage. When we come back, we'll be getting ready for Happy Hour Live from here in Pocono Raceway.